Saskatchewan is sitting on a fortune. Hospitals are losing access to it, American companies are quietly buying it up, and Ottawa has done almost nothing. If you think this is just another political story, stay with me, because this one affects your hospital, your economy, and Canada's place in the global supply chain. Drop a comment right now. Did you even know Canada had one of the largest helium reserves on Earth? A third of the world's helium supply disappeared almost overnight. Iran's escalating war in the Middle East struck Qatar's Ras Laffan industrial city, the single largest liquefied natural gas terminal on the planet. Qatar produces roughly one-third of all global helium as a byproduct of that operation. The moment the attack hit, Qatar Energy declared force majeure. Supplies were cut, prices began spiking within hours, and the world started scrambling for an alternative. That alternative exists. It is buried under the Canadian prairies, and Canada is barely touching it. Before we go further, helium is not a party balloon story. Helium is a federally designated critical mineral. It cools the superconducting magnets inside MRI machines to minus 269 degrees Celsius, just 4 degrees above absolute zero. There is no substitute. When a hospital exhausts its liquid helium supply, the magnet warms, loses superconductivity in a process called a quench, and the machine is destroyed. Saskatchewan hospitals have already been warned. Liquid helium allocations are being cut by 50%. Researchers at institutions like Princess Margaret Cancer Centre in Toronto use liquid helium in spectrometers that take years to replace. Delayed helium, delayed diagnosis, delayed treatment. And this is happening right now. If you find this important, share this video with someone who should know. Here is where Canada's story gets complicated and frustrating. Saskatchewan holds the 5th largest helium reserves on Earth. The geology of the Western Canada Sedimentary Basin traps helium alongside nitrogen, not natural gas. That means Saskatchewan's helium is among the cleanest produced anywhere on the planet. No flaring, a dramatically lower carbon footprint. In a world where Japan, South Korea, and Europe are actively seeking greener supply chains, Saskatchewan helium carries a premium. Japan and South Korea have already approached Canadian producers requesting long-term supply contracts. The demand signal could not be louder, and yet Canada currently produces roughly 3% of global helium supply. The province set a target in 2021 to reach 10% by 2030, generating $500 million annually in exports. At today's wartime elevated prices, that number is likely higher. So why is a country with the reserves, the geology, the clean profile, and the buyers lined up still sitting at 3%? 2 reasons, both fixable, neither fixed. Canada lists 34 critical minerals. 33 of them can access flow-through shares, a tax mechanism that lets investors pass exploration costs directly to shareholders as deductions. It is one of the most powerful tools for attracting junior mining investment this country has. Helium is the one exception. The single critical mineral on Canada's own list that cannot access flow-through shares. Saskatchewan Energy Minister Chris Budry traveled to Ottawa specifically to push for this change. His message was simple: treat helium like the other 33. He says he has heard encouraging signals and expects movement in the fall budget. But it has not happened yet. And every month without the fix is a month where exploration capital flows south instead. Richard Dunn, Executive Director of the Helium Developers Association of Canada, said it plainly. When a third of the world's helium is locked up in the Strait of Hormuz and cannot move, Canada has a generational opportunity. Saskatchewan has an even greater one. But without the tax change, that opportunity is being left on the table. The second obstacle connects Saskatchewan directly to Canada's oldest and most frustrating resource problem. Every helium company in this province must ship its product to the United States for liquefaction. There is no domestic helium liquefaction facility in Canada. The liquid form, the form that hospitals, semiconductor plants, and research labs actually need, must be processed in American facilities before it can reach Canadian customers or be exported internationally. That creates 2 compounding problems. Canadian producers pay American processing fees, American transport costs, and face American trade exposure. And if American liquefaction capacity is disrupted by tariffs, by extreme weather, or by a simple policy shift, Canadian helium cannot reach anyone. Saskatchewan Energy Minister Budry says he believes a domestic facility will eventually be built, but there is no confirmed proponent. No federal funding, no timeline. Here is the geopolitical layer that most people are missing entirely. Washington has explicitly told Canadian trade envoys it wants deeper access to Canadian critical minerals as part of any trade agreement renewal. Helium is on that list. American semiconductor manufacturers, defense contractors, and research institutions are all absorbing the same supply shock from Qatar's force majeure. They need stable, sanction-free, politically reliable helium. Canada has it. But the United States currently controls the bottleneck. Its liquefaction monopoly means Canadian helium gets processed in America and sold back to the world on American terms. If Canada builds its own liquefaction capacity and unlocks the flow-through share treatment for helium exploration, everything inverts. Canada becomes a direct supplier to Asia, Europe, and the United States. The country that currently processes Canadian helium becomes just another customer. The same logic that made every Canadian angry about oil pipelines and LNG export capacity applies here. Canada is sitting on a resource it cannot fully monetize because it lacks the processing infrastructure to move it independently. And while Ottawa deliberates, American companies have been quietly acquiring helium exploration licenses in Saskatchewan. The same pattern that played out with oil sands, with potash, with uranium. Foreign capital moves while domestic policy stalls. Dunn of the Helium Developers Association has confirmed the interest from Japan, South Korea, and American buyers is real and active. The question is whether Canadian companies backed by Canadian tax policy and Canadian infrastructure will capture the value, or whether it flows south before Ottawa acts. Here is what is confirmed. Canada holds the 5th largest helium reserves in the world. Saskatchewan currently produces approximately 3% of global supply, with a target of 10% by 2030. Qatar produces roughly 1/3 of global helium. Iran's attacks forced Qatar Energy to declare force majeure, with output expected to drop by 14%. Russia, another major supplier, has imposed export controls on helium until next year. Air Liquide, Canada's largest liquid helium distributor, has declared force majeure and warned of further price hikes. Saskatchewan hospitals have been warned of 50% reductions in liquid helium allocations. Japan and South Korea have approached Canadian producers for long-term supply contracts. Helium cannot currently access flow-through shares. All Canadian helium must be shipped to the United States for liquefaction. What is not yet confirmed, the federal government has not announced a change to helium's tax treatment. No domestic liquefaction facility has a confirmed builder or federal funding. The path to 10% global supply by 2030 remains uncertain given today's production capacity. Iran's war just eliminated 1/3 of the world's helium supply. MRI machines are already being rationed. Semiconductor factories are feeling the squeeze. Research labs are one shortage away from equipment that takes years to replace. Canada has the reserves, the clean geology, the willing buyers, and a straightforward 2-part policy fix that would unlock $500 million in annual exports. The gap between what Canada has and what Canada produces comes down to a tax change and one piece of infrastructure. Both fixable, neither fixed. This is a story we track daily because the numbers are moving. If Canada was holding $1 billion in oil above ground and refusing to pipe it anywhere, Canadians would be furious. This is the same story. Underground, underpriced, underprotected. If this surprised you, hit share, because most Canadians have no idea this is happening beneath their feet. And if you want to follow what Ottawa does next, subscribe below. We cover Canada's resource and economic stories every single day, without the noise, without the spin.